Companion planting is simply the method of putting more than one type of plants together to mutually benefit each other. So for example, when you are growing pepper plants, you may want to plant marigolds next to your peppers because marigolds will repel a lot of the pests that are common to pepper plants. When you plant okra, you may want to plant radishes around the base of your okra. When you plant carrots, you might want to interplant those with lettuce. Carrots grow below the soil, lettuce grows above the soil, so you can grow two things in one amount of space with some careful arrangement. Companion planting is helpful for lots of reasons. It can help your crops taste better. It can help avoid a lot of pests that can cause damage to your crops over time. And there are lots of combinations, and there are lots of different, I won't say myths, but there's a lot of wives' tales about companion planting. Things you should plant together, things you shouldn't plant together. What I would say to you is don't get so hung up on this that you get analysis paralysis and you're afraid to plant anything, because what if they're bad companions? For the vast majority of vegetables that home gardeners grow, you can pretty much use any combination of planting. But if you do want to try to help with pest control, putting certain combinations together will help. And in this lesson, we're going to break that down. I'm going to give you some herbs that are good for companions, some flowers that make good companions, and veggie combos that work well together in the home garden as well. So as you read through this section, make some notes on what you can plant together in your garden this year and see if companion planting makes a difference for you. Hey friends, I'm so excited to talk with you today about one of my absolute favorite things in the garden, companion planting. It's sort of like watching nature's own team building exercise where the plants work together, helping each other grow stronger and more productive. Just like a good community, some plants thrive when they're paired with the right buddies. And honestly, once you see the benefits of this, it's going to change the entire way you look at gardening. So whether you're growing food for your family or you just love watching things grow, companion planting is such an easy, rewarding way to work with nature rather than working against it. It's not about making things harder, it's about learning to pay attention and trust what the plants are telling you. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's dive into the fun and practical world of companion planting. I'm confident you're going to love it. All right, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is companion planting? At its core, it's the idea that some plants grow better together. They help each other out in ways you might not expect, whether it's by improving the soil health, keeping away the pest, or even making the other plant taste better. It's like having that perfect garden friend who's got your back, and all they need is a little space right next to you. You can think of companion planting as partnering with nature. It's really been around for centuries, with ancient civilizations like the Native Americans using techniques like the Three Sisters method, which is basically companion planting. With the Three Sisters method, you plant corn, beans, and squash together in a way that benefits all three. The beans fix nitrogen into the soil for the corn gives the beans something to climb, and the squash shades the ground, keeping weeds down and moisture in. It's really simple, but also genius. The cool thing is you don't have to be a master gardener to get started with this. You just need to know a few good pairings and then let nature do the rest. Once you begin, you'll start to see your garden as more than just rows of plants. It becomes this dynamic ecosystem where everything is working together to thrive. And trust me, when you see that happening in your own backyard, it's so amazing. So now that we've got the basics down, let's talk about why companion planting is such a game changer. Honestly, this is where it gets really exciting because the benefits are huge and they come naturally when you pair the right plants together. So first up, pest control. I don't know about you, but I am not a fan of constantly fighting pests in my garden. The great thing about companion planting is that certain plants can help repel the bugs that you don't want. For example, planting marigolds near your tomatoes can keep those pesky nematodes away. Basil, it smells incredible, but it also repels flies and mosquitoes. So it's perfect to plant near your potatoes or your tomatoes and your peppers. Think of it as creating a little natural defense system in your garden without having to rely on chemicals or sprays. The other thing to consider with companion planting is that it's great for enhancing growth. Some plants just grow better when they're paired with the right companions. A great example of this is planting beans or peas next to heavy feeders like corn or tomatoes. The beans fix the nitrogen into the soil, and that boosts the growth for other plants. It's like giving them extra fertilizer in the most natural way possible. Another benefit of companion planting is attracting beneficial insects. If you want to bring in pollinators like bees and butterflies or predatory insects like ladybugs that eat the aphids, then companion planting can help you accomplish that. Planting things like dill, fennel, or alyssum around your veggies can attract these helpers, and suddenly your garden becomes this buzzing, thriving ecosystem where everything has its own role. And then finally, there's improving soil health. Certain plants like beans and cover crops can actually restore nutrients to your soil. And others like deep-rooted plants such as comfrey can help break up compacted soil and bring nutrients from deep within the ground to the surface. So by mixing these plants into your garden, you're essentially creating healthier soil without a lot of extra work. And that is ultimately going to bring you bigger, healthier plants. The thing about companion planting is that it makes your garden more resilient, more productive, and honestly, a lot more fun. It's nature's way of showing you that everything works better together. We all need community, even our plants. And once you see these benefits in your own garden, you'll never want to go back. Now that you're starting to see the benefits of companion planting, let's dive into some of my favorite tried and true pairings that you can try in your garden right away. These are some of my favorite combos that not only work well to repel the pest, but they also will make your garden healthier and more productive. So let's start with my absolute favorite combo, and that is tomatoes and basil. It's a dynamic duo of the garden. Not only does basil help repel pests like aphids, whiteflies, and mosquitoes, but it's also said to enhance the flavor of your tomatoes. So you're not only keeping your plants healthy, but you're also growing tastier tomatoes. It's a win-win, right? Plus, who doesn't love picking fresh basil and tomatoes right from the garden or making a good batch of pesto? Another good pairing that I enjoy planting are carrots and onions. These two are awesome companions because onions have a strong scent that helps repel carrot flies, which can become a real problem if you're trying to grow a good carrot crop. By planting these two together, you create a natural defense system. It's such an easy pairing that not only does it make sense, but it saves you the headache of dealing with pests later on. Next up, we have marigolds, and honestly, marigolds are the perfect companion for practically everything. I plant marigolds in every single bed and row in my garden as a companion because they are so effective. And as a bonus, they're beautiful. Marigolds are like the social butterflies of the garden. They repel aphids and nematodes, and they invite a lot of beneficial insects to the party. And best of all, marigolds are going to keep hornworms off of your tomatoes and peppers, and hornworms can absolutely decimate a tomato crop in a matter of hours. So marigolds are a must-have in the tomato garden. One of the oldest and most loved companion planting combos is the Three Sisters method that I mentioned earlier. This trio is a power squad: corn, beans, and squash. The corn provides a natural pole for the beans to climb. The squash shades the soil and prevents weeds. Another combo you might want to try is cabbage and dill, or broccoli and dill, or cauliflower and dill. Any of these plants, which are brassicas like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, any of those can be really prone to damage from cabbage worms, and it can be very frustrating. Cabbage worms can absolutely demolish your crop before you even know what happened, and so dill is going to be your new best friend anytime you plant brassicas. Plant dill anytime you plant cabbage or broccoli, and it will help repel those nasty cabbage worms and protect your crop. Another great pairing that you want to think about is sage with any kind of greens. I've noticed sage is particularly helpful beside my kale or beside Swiss chard or even beside lettuce, but sage is an all-around good herb to just put all over the garden. Now, along with good companions, we need to talk about bad companions because there are some combinations that you should avoid. For example, tomatoes and potatoes. Now, I know it's tempting to plant them together because potatoes grow underground and potatoes grow underground and tomatoes grow above ground. But because they're both nightshades, you really don't want to plant tomatoes and potatoes together. They're both going to be prone to the same kind of pests, the same diseases like blight. So it's really best to plant these two things far apart as much as possible. Another plant that can be a little bit tricky is fennel. As much as I love fennel for its culinary uses, it can stunt the growth of a lot of vegetables. It's sort of a loner in the garden, so if you decide to grow fennel, definitely give it its own space. Put it in a separate bed or tuck it away in a spot far from your other vegetables. These are just a few of the many companion planting options out there, but they're great starting points if you're new to this concept. Once you start experimenting, you'll find your own favorite combinations and your garden will thank you for it. Now that we've covered some great plant pairings, let's talk about how to actually get this going in your garden. The good news, companion planting doesn't have to be complicated. It's really about observing what works and applying simple strategies to maximize your garden's potential. The first thing you want to do is plan your garden layout. You don't have to redesign everything, but think about how different plants can help each other. Start by grouping your plants based on their needs, like how much sunlight or water they require. Then add in your companion plants strategically. For example, plant your tomatoes and basil together in a sunny spot where both will thrive, and then tuck marigolds between the crops to help with pest control. Next up, consider succession planting. This is where companion planting gets really efficient. By growing fast-maturing plants like lettuce or radishes alongside slower-growing plants like tomatoes, you maximize your space and you keep the garden producing throughout the season, so you're constantly harvesting some sort of food from your garden. You can harvest the quick growers before the bigger plants take over the space, so nothing goes to waste. Another tip is to think about crop rotation in the terms of long term. Each year, switch up where you plant your companion crops. This not only keeps your garden soil healthier, but it also helps prevent disease and pest buildup. So for instance, if you plant tomatoes and basil in one spot this year, you might want to try planting beans and squash in that spot next year to help replenish the nitrogen in the soil. It keeps the garden ecosystem balanced and productive by moving things around from year to year. Finally, don't forget that gardening is really just a big experiment. There is no one-size-fits-all approach here, especially when it comes to companion planting. What works in my garden here in North Carolina might be a little different in your garden, depending on your climate and conditions. So start small, test out a few pairings, and watch how the plants respond. If you use your failures to propel you on next year, then your garden will only get better with time. And you can think about, what went wrong. Look at it like a scientist. If your tomato crop failed terribly last year, what factors could have gone wrong? What were they planted near? What pests were active in your garden? Did they get enough sun? How often did you water them? As you start to pick apart your failures, you'll learn that your failures become your greatest teachers in the garden. So don't be afraid of failure. Instead, embrace it and learn from it. And most of all, don't give up. Listen, it's incredibly rare for somebody to plant a garden for the first time and for it to turn out like a beautiful spread from a magazine. Instead, most first gardens struggle and they look a little scraggly, and that's okay. It takes time. Don't compare your first year garden to somebody else's 10th year garden. It's a process and it's a journey, and it's very important that you remember from the beginning that failures will happen, but what you do with those failures will shape the whole future of your garden. We've enjoyed giving you just a little look at our trellises and our greenhouse and our setup and all the ways that you can use a backyard to provide food for your family. Happy gardening.